Her crayons danced, bringing worlds to life on paper, a 10-year-old girl lost in the vibrant hues of imagination. But to the bitter old man who towered over her, her joyful presence was an intrusion, her black skin a blight on his park. He snatched her art, tore her dreams, his racist venom spewing freely. He thought she was just another helpless child. He had no idea that the tears streaming down her face were about to summon a father whose badge wasn't just a symbol of authority, but the very shield of the city's police chief, a father who was about to teach him a lesson in justice that would echo through every corner of their town. Hello, and a warm welcome to each of you joining us today. The narrative we are about to unfold is a poignant exploration of innocence, confronted by prejudice, and the profound strength that can emerge from the deepest bonds of family and community. It's a testament to the fact that even in everyday spaces, battles for dignity are fought and won. We are truly honored to have you with us. If stories that challenge our perceptions, ignite our empathy, and reaffirm our belief in justice are what you seek, we invite you to become an integral part of our community by subscribing and clicking that notification bell. Our mission is to amplify voices that matter, sharing powerful truths every single day. Your presence here makes that possible. Now, let us step into the heart of today's story. The late afternoon sun, a benevolent artist in its own right, cast long, dappled shadows across Harmony Glen Park, painting the sprawling green lawns and ancient oak trees in strokes of gold and amber. It was the kind of idyllic suburban park that graced the covers of town brochures, a place where children's laughter mingled with the distant bark of happy dogs and the gentle sigh of the wind through the leaves. For 10-year-old Maya Johnson, Harmony Glen was more than just a park. It was her open-air studio, her sanctuary, her boundless canvas. With a spirit as vibrant and curious as the array of colored pencils she carried in her worn backpack, Maya would often spend her after-school hours nestled beneath the protective branches of her favorite magnolia tree, her sketchpad open on her lap, her small brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously translated the world around her, and the far more fantastical worlds within her, onto paper. Maya was a whirlwind of creative energy, a child whose imagination knew no bounds. Her drawings were a riot of color and life. Fantastical creatures with iridescent wings, brave knights on valiant steeds, serene landscapes bathed in impossible moonlight, and most frequently, portraits of the everyday people she encountered, imbued with a startling depth of character and an uncanny knack for capturing a fleeting expression, a hidden emotion. She was a keen observer of the human condition, even at her tender age, blessed with an empathy that far outstripped her years. Her laughter was infectious, her optimism a bright, unwavering beacon. She was, by all accounts, a joy. She was also the beloved only child of Captain Marcus Johnson, the recently appointed chief of police for the city of Oak Haven. Marcus Johnson was a man of considerable stature, both physically and morally. A decorated veteran with a distinguished career in law enforcement, he had risen through the ranks on a platform of integrity, community engagement, and an unyielding commitment to impartial justice. His appointment as Oak Haven's first black police chief had been hailed by many as a significant step forward for the historically conservative, though rapidly diversifying southern city. However, it had also been met with a quiet, sometimes not so quiet, undercurrent of resentment and resistance from certain entrenched factions within the community, and indeed within his own department. Marcus was acutely aware of the complexities of his position. He knew he was a symbol, a pioneer, but he carried that weight with a quiet dignity, focusing on the hard work of building bridges, fostering trust, and ensuring that every citizen of Oak Haven, regardless of their race or background, felt safe and respected under his watch. To Maya, however, He was simply Daddy, the man who taught her how to ride her bike, who told the best bedtime stories, often involving daring police chases, where the heroes always outsmarted the villains with kindness and cleverness, and whose warm, strong hugs could make even the scariest shadows disappear. Maya knew her father held an important and demanding job, one that often kept him away late into the evening, but the true weight and significance of his title, police chief, were concepts that existed on the periphery of her 10-year-old world. Her father was, first and foremost, her protector, her hero, her dad. That particular Tuesday afternoon, Maya was deeply engrossed in her latest creation, a whimsical depiction of Harmony Glen Park itself, but transformed into an enchanted forest where the squirrels wore tiny crowns and the pigeons delivered messages written on shimmering leaves. She hummed softly to herself, a melody of her own invention, her tongue poking out from the corner of her mouth in concentration as she carefully selected a vibrant turquoise pencil to color the magical stream she'd imagined flowing past the old bandstand. She was so lost in her artistic endeavor that she didn't immediately notice the stooped, irritable figure of Mr. Alistair Henderson approaching her chosen sanctuary beneath the magnolia. Mr. Henderson was a fixture in the neighborhood, though not a particularly beloved one. A retired accountant in his late 60s with a perpetually sour expression etched onto his thin, pale face and a wardrobe that seemed to consist exclusively of drab, ill-fitting cardigans. Henderson was known for his curmudgeonly demeanor, his endless litany of complaints about everything from barking dogs to fallen leaves, and among those who had the misfortune of more than a passing acquaintance, his thinly veiled, often casually expressed, racist and classist views. He considered Harmony Glen Park an extension of his own meticulously ordered, if somewhat barren, backyard, and he viewed any deviation from his narrow definition of acceptable park behavior with a deep and abiding suspicion. He had, on several prior occasions, made snide remarks to other black families picnicking in the park, his comments always couched in just enough ambiguity to avoid direct accusation but laden with unmistakable prejudice. Today his ire was inexplicably, perhaps predictably, directed at the sight of young Maya Johnson, a small black girl sitting alone, quietly and contentedly drawing in his park. To Henderson, her very presence, her joyful absorption in her art, seemed to be an affront, a disruption of the natural order he so fiercely, if silently, defended. He approached her with the slow, deliberate gait of a man on a mission of petty correction, his lips already pursed in disapproval. "Well now, what do we have here?" Henderson's voice, when it finally cut through Maya's concentration, was as grating and unpleasant as an unoiled hinge. It startled her, and she looked up, her wide, innocent eyes blinking in surprise at the stern, unsmiling man looming over her. "Hello, sir," Maya said politely, a slight tremor of unease in her voice. Her grandmother had taught her to always be respectful to her elders, but there was something in this man's demeanor that made the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. "You shouldn't be making such a mess here, young lady," Henderson said, his gaze sweeping disdainfully over her scattered pencils and open sketchpad as if they were evidence of some heinous crime. "This is a public park, you know, for everyone to enjoy. Not for this." He waved a dismissive hand at her artwork. Maya looked down at her drawing, then back at him, confused. "I'm not making a mess, sir. I'm just drawing, and I always pick up all my things when I'm done." "Drawing, she says," Henderson scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Looks more like a lot of scribbling and noise to me, and you're certainly making enough of a disturbance with all your things spread out like this. Decent people are trying to enjoy the peace and quiet." Maya glanced around. The park was sparsely populated at this late afternoon hour. A young couple strolled hand in hand far across the lawn. An elderly woman was reading on a distant bench. There was no disturbance, no noise, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of children on the playground equipment. She was sitting quietly, bothering no one. "I'm not being loud, sir," she said, her voice small but firm. "Don't you talk back to me, girl." Henderson's voice suddenly sharpened, his face flushing an ugly mottled red. The thin veneer of cantankerous neighborliness was gone, replaced by something far more venomous. "I know your type, always thinking you can do whatever you please, wherever you please. This isn't your personal playground. This park is for respectable, law-abiding citizens, people who belong here." His emphasis on the word belong was laden with a clear, unmistakable, and deeply racist insinuation. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. She didn't fully understand the complex layers of his prejudice, but she understood cruelty, she understood meanness, and she understood, with a child's unerring intuition, that this man disliked her simply for who she was. I have a right to be here too," she whispered, clutching her sketchpad protectively to her chest. "A right?" Henderson sneered, stepping closer, his shadow falling over her, making her feel even smaller, more vulnerable. "Children like you don't have rights. You have rules. And the rule is you don't bother decent folk. Now, why don't you just pack up your little trinkets and run along home before I have to call someone to make you?" The threat, though vague, hung heavy in the air. Maya, now thoroughly frightened and on the verge of tears, began to quickly gather her pencils, her small hands trembling. She just wanted him to go away, to leave her alone. But Mr. Henderson wasn't finished with his petty display of power. His eyes fell on the vibrant, fantastical drawing she had been working on, the one of the enchanted forest. With a sudden, contemptuous movement, he reached down, snatched the sketchpad from her lap before she could react, and held up her drawing, his lip curled in a disdainful sneer. "What is this garbage?" he spat out. "Wasting good paper on such nonsense. This is what they teach you in those schools nowadays? No discipline, no respect for proper art." And then, with a deliberate, cruel twist of his hands, he ripped Maya's drawing, her beautiful magical forest, cleanly in two. He let the torn pieces flutter from his fingers to the grass at her feet. "There," he said with a grunt of grim satisfaction, "that's what I think of your art." That was the moment something inside Maya broke. The fear and confusion gave way to a wave of profound, helpless sorrow. Her enchanted forest, her carefully rendered creatures, her vibrant colors, all destroyed by this hateful, angry man. A sob escaped her lips, then another, and soon she was crying openly, fat tears streaming down her cheeks, a small, heartbroken figure huddled beneath the indifferent gaze of the ancient magnolia. Mr. Henderson, seemingly pleased with the distress he had caused, merely grunted again. "That's better. Maybe now you'll learn some respect." He turned to leave, already dismissing the incident, already congratulating himself on having taught a lesson. He had no idea that his casual act of cruelty, his petty tyranny over a 10-year-old child, had just set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably alter his own comfortable, prejudiced world. Unseen by Henderson, but not by everyone, the ugly encounter had not gone entirely unwitnessed. A group of 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, had been idly tossing a frisbee on a nearby stretch of lawn. They were far enough away not to have heard the initial exchange clearly, but Henderson's raised, aggressive voice and Maya's subsequent, unmistakable sobs had drawn their attention. One of the boys, a lanky kid named Jamal, no relation to the violinist from another story, but a common name filled with its own potential for everyday heroism, instinctively pulled out his smartphone and, with a practiced ease born of a generation raised on social media, began recording. He captured the last, most damning moments of the confrontation. Henderson looming over the crying Maya, the contemptuous tearing of her drawing, his dismissive parting words. The footage was shaky, the audio slightly muffled by the distance and the breeze, but the raw, ugly essence of the injustice was undeniably sickeningly clear. As Henderson ambled away, self-satisfied, the teenagers exchanged shocked, angry glances. The girl, a fiery redhead named Chloe, who knew Maya vaguely from the neighborhood, was the first to rush over to the still sobbing child. "Hey, are you okay?" Chloe asked gently, kneeling beside Maya. "That man, he was a total jerk. What happened?" Through her tears, Maya hiccuped out a fractured account of Henderson's verbal abuse and the destruction of her drawing. Jamal and the other boy, David, joined them, their young faces alight with indignation. "We saw him, Maya," Jamal said, his voice tight with anger. "We got it on video, that old creep tearing up your picture." He showed her the brief, damning clip on his phone. The sight of her own humiliation, reflected back at her from the small screen, paradoxically seemed to stem Maya's tears, replacing them with a nascent, unfamiliar flicker of anger and a desperate need for comfort. I want my daddy," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Can I call my daddy?" Chloe, ever practical, immediately offered her own phone, as Maya, in her distress, couldn't seem to manage her own. Maya fumbled with the unfamiliar device for a moment, then, with trembling fingers, dialed the number she knew by heart, the number that always meant safety, the number that always meant help was on its way. Captain Marcus Johnson was in his office at the Oak Haven Police Headquarters, a sprawling modern building that felt a world away from the sun-dappled tranquility of Harmony Glen Park. He was deep in a budget meeting with the city manager and several members of the city council, a tense, often frustrating affair involving arcane spreadsheets and competing departmental priorities. His official police radio was on, its low crackle a familiar background hum, but his personal cell phone, usually kept on silent during such important meetings, was, by a fortunate stroke of serendipity, set to vibrate for calls from his daughter's number. He had an ingrained fatherly instinct, a sixth sense for when Maya truly needed him. When the phone vibrated insistently against his hip, he glanced at the caller ID, Maya Bear, and a small smile touched his lips. He excused himself, Presidente, from the meeting with a brief apology, stepping out into the relative quiet of the hallway. "Hey, sweetie," he answered, his voice warm and reassuring. "Everything okay? You usually don't call Daddy when he's at work unless it's super important." "Daddy," Maya's voice on the other end was small, shaky, punctuated by sniffles and barely suppressed sobs. "Daddy, can you come get me? I'm in the Peat Park, by the big tree, and a man was mean to me. He ripped my picture." And then she dissolved into a fresh torrent of tears, unable to articulate more. Marcus Johnson's blood ran cold. The vague, bureaucratic details of the budget meeting vanished from his mind, replaced by a primal, protective urgency. He didn't know the specifics, didn't know the full extent of what had happened, but he heard the raw fear and distress in his daughter's voice, and that was all that mattered. "I'm on my way, Maya Bear," he said, his voice now a low, controlled rumble, the voice of a man accustomed to taking charge in moments of crisis. "Don't you worry about a thing. Daddy's coming. Are you with anyone? Are you safe right now?" "Some big kids are here," Maya managed between sobs. "They're nice." "Okay, good. Stay with them. Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in less than 10 minutes. He hung up, his face a grim, unreadable mask. He strode back into the budget meeting, his imposing presence immediately silencing the ongoing discussion. "Gentlemen, ma'am," he said, his voice tight with a barely restrained urgency, "I apologize, but a critical family emergency requires my immediate attention. We will have to reschedule." Without waiting for a response, he turned and left, his long strides eating up the polished corridor. He didn't run, but there was an undeniable, almost dangerous intensity in his movements. He was no longer Police Chief Johnson, navigating the political minefields of city governance. He was Marcus Johnson, father, and someone had hurt his child. The short drive from police headquarters to Harmony Glen Park was, for Marcus, an exercise in engaged self-control. Every traffic light seemed to last an eternity, every slow-moving vehicle an intolerable obstruction. His mind raced, conjuring a dozen different scenarios, each more alarming than the last. He kept his police radio on, listening for any calls related to the park, but there was nothing, just the usual mundane chatter of a Tuesday afternoon. This, whatever it was, hadn't escalated to official police involvement yet. Or perhaps, a more chilling thought, it had, and the officer involved hadn't deemed it worthy of a report. As he pulled his unmarked police cruiser, his personal vehicle, but one instantly recognizable to any officer in Oak Haven, to a sharp halt near the designated magnolia tree, his eyes immediately found Maya. She was a small, forlorn figure huddled on the grass, her shoulders shaking, her bright pink backpack lying discarded beside her. Chloe, the red-headed teenager, was kneeling beside her, one arm protectively around Maya's shoulders, murmuring words of comfort. The two boys, Jamal and David, stood a little way off, looking awkward but clearly protective, their gazes scanning the park as if standing guard. Marcus was out of the car before the engine had fully died, his long legs covering the distance to his daughter in a matter of seconds. "Maya!" he called, his voice a mixture of relief and deep concern. "Daddy!" Maya looked up, her tear-streaked face crumpling anew at the sight of him. She scrambled to her feet and ran into his outstretched arms, burying her face in his uniform shirt, her small body racked with sobs. Marcus held her tight, his own heart aching at her distress, a cold, hard anger beginning to solidify in his chest. He stroked her hair, murmuring soothing words, waiting for her sobs to subside enough for her to speak. Chloe, Jamal, and David approached them respectfully, their youthful faces a mixture of concern and righteous indignation. "Captain Johnson, sir," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We saw what happened. That old man, Mr. Henderson, he was real mean to Maya. He yelled at her, called her names, and then he ripped up her drawing." Jamal chimed in, his voice tight with adolescent outrage. "Yeah, and we got it on video, sir. Most of it, anyway. The part where he tears the picture and walks off all smug. He was a total bully." Jamal fumbled with his phone, his fingers surprisingly steady as he queued up the short, damning video clip. Marcus watched the shaky footage, his expression growing grimmer with each passing second. He saw the fear in his daughter's eyes, the aggressive, contemptuous posture of the man identified as Henderson, the deliberate, cruel act of tearing her artwork. The video, though brief, was irrefutable. It depicted not just an act of petty meanness, but a clear instance of verbal abuse, intimidation, and the malicious destruction of a child's property, all seemingly unprovoked, all directed at a vulnerable 10-year-old girl. And given Henderson's known proclivities, which Marcus, as police chief, was unfortunately well aware of from previous, albeit minor, neighborhood complaints, a racial animus was almost certainly a motivating factor. "Thank you, all of you," Marcus said to the teenagers, his voice low and resonant with a controlled power that they instinctively recognized and respected. You did the right thing by staying with Maya and by recording this. Jamal, can you send that video to my work email, please? It will be very important." Jamal nodded quickly, already tapping at his screen. Marcus then gently disengaged Maya from his embrace, kneeling down to look her directly in the eyes. "Maya Bear," he said softly, his voice now filled with a father's tender concern. "Are you hurt anywhere? Did that man touch you aside from taking your sketch pad?" Maya shook her head, fresh tears welling. No, Daddy. He just yelled and said mean things. And he said I didn't belong here. And then he tore my beautiful enchanted forest." Her voice broke again on a fresh sob. "He said you didn't belong here?" Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. The last vestiges of Police Chief Johnson, the composed public servant, were rapidly receding, replaced by Marcus Johnson, the enraged father of a beloved black child who had just been subjected to a vile, racist attack in a public park in his city under his watch. He took a deep, steadying breath, fighting to maintain his professional composure. He had to handle this correctly by the book, despite the inferno raging within him. "Okay, sweetie," he said, his voice regaining its firm, reassuring tone. "You're safe now. Daddy's here. Can you tell me exactly where Mr. Henderson went?" Maya, still sniffling, pointed a trembling finger towards a well-kept two-story colonial house on the far side of the park, its pristine white paint and perfectly manicured lawn a stark contrast to the ugliness of its owner's recent behavior. He lives over there, Daddy. He's always grumpy." Just then, as if summoned by the very mention of his name, Mr. Henderson himself emerged from his front door, a pair of gardening shears in his hand, ostensibly to trim his prize-winning rose bushes. He saw the small group gathered by the magnolia tree, Maya, the teenagers, and the tall, imposing figure of Marcus Johnson, still in his police chief's uniform. He also, crucially, saw the unmarked but clearly official police cruiser parked nearby. A flicker of unease, perhaps even a dawning awareness that his earlier actions might have unforeseen consequences, crossed his sour face. He hesitated for a moment, then, apparently deciding that a preemptive offense was his best defense, he began to stride purposefully across the lawn towards them, his expression one of aggrieved indignation. "Well, well, well," Henderson called out as he approached, his voice laced with a self-righteous belligerence. "What's all this commotion, then? I trust you're here about that disrespectful little girl causing a nuisance in a public amenity. I had to speak to her quite firmly, I can tell you. No sense of propriety, these children nowadays, and her scribblings were making a mess." He clearly hadn't yet registered the full uniform or the rank insignia on Marcus's shoulders, or perhaps in his arrogant self-absorption he simply didn't care. He saw only another authority figure he could attempt to manipulate with his own twisted version of events. Marcus Johnson rose slowly to his full, imposing height, his face an unreadable granite-like mask. The teenagers instinctively stepped back, sensing the sudden, palpable shift in the atmosphere, the coiling tension that now surrounded the police chief like a physical force. Maya, sensing her father's barely suppressed fury, clutched at his hand. "Mr. Henderson, I presume," Marcus said, his voice deceptively calm, yet carrying an undercurrent of controlled power that should have served as a stark warning. "That's right," Henderson affirmed, puffing out his chest slightly, clearly misinterpreting Marcus's composure as deference. "Alistair Henderson. Lived in this neighborhood for 42 years, I'll have you know. Paid my taxes. I expect a certain level of decorum in my park." "Your park, Mr. Henderson?" Marcus repeated, one eyebrow arching almost imperceptibly. "I was under the impression that Harmony Glen was a public park, open to all citizens of Oakhaven, including—" He paused, his gaze flicking meaningfully towards his daughter. 10-year-old children who enjoy drawing. Well, yes, of course, public, Henderson blustered, a flicker of uncertainty now entering his eyes, as he began to register the sheer, uncompromising authority radiating from the man before him. But there are limits. And that child, he pointed an accusatory finger at Maya, who shrank further behind her father, was being disruptive, insolent even when I tried to correct her behavior, and her so-called art. It was an eyesore. An eyesore, Mr. Henderson. Marcus's voice remained dangerously quiet. My daughter's artistic expression, her joy, her innocent pastime, was an eyesore to you? Is that what you're telling me? It was only then, as Marcus took a deliberate step forward, allowing the afternoon sun to fall fully on the gleaming gold badge and the 4 stars of a police chief pinned to his chest, that the full, horrifying reality of the situation seemed to dawn on Alistair Henderson. His jaw dropped. His face, already ruddy, turned a shade paler. He looked from the badge to Marcus's cold, unyielding eyes, to the tear-streaked face of Maya, and then back to Marcus. The gardening shears slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered onto the grass. You're... Henderson stammered, his earlier bluster completely gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening panic. I am Captain Marcus Johnson, Chief of Police for the city of Oakhaven, Marcus stated, his voice now devoid of any warmth, resonant with the full weight of his office. And more importantly, Mr. Henderson, in this particular moment, I am the father of the 10-year-old child you just verbally abused, intimidated, and whose personal property you maliciously destroyed. We have eyewitness testimony, Mr. Henderson. We have video evidence. And we have a very, very frightened little girl. He paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy and ominous. So, Mr. Henderson, perhaps you would now care to explain to me, with considerable care and absolute honesty, exactly what transpired here in this public park this afternoon. Alistair Henderson looked as if he might faint. The hunter had, in a most unexpected and public fashion, just become the hunted. The casual cruelty he had so arrogantly dispensed was about to be repaid with the full, unyielding, and entirely dispassionate force of the law, wielded by a man who had both the authority and a deeply personal, fiercely protective motivation to see justice done. The quiet afternoon in Harmony Glen Park was about to become a very loud and very public lesson in consequences. The transformation in Alistair Henderson was instantaneous and almost pathetic to behold. The blustering, self-righteous indignation drained away, replaced by a cringing, obsequious fear. His eyes, which had moments before been narrowed in contempt, now darted about like those of a cornered animal, seeking an escape route that simply didn't exist. Chief Johnson, I had no idea. She didn't say, it was just a misunderstanding, a regrettable incident. He stammered, his voice a reedy, unconvincing whine. A misunderstanding, Mr. Henderson. Marcus's voice was dangerously soft, each word precise and laden with an icy disdain that was far more terrifying than any shout. My 10-year-old daughter comes to a public park to draw, to enjoy the sunshine, to simply be, and you accost her, verbally abuse her with what witnesses describe as racially charged invective, tell her she doesn't belong here, and then, in a final act of petty malice, you destroy her artwork. You call that a misunderstanding? He took another deliberate step closer, and Henderson instinctively recoiled. I call that, Mr. Henderson, several potential criminal offenses, including harassment of a minor, malicious destruction of property, and depending on the full testimony of these young witnesses. He gestured towards Chloe, Jamal, and David, who were watching the unfolding drama with a mixture of awe and grim satisfaction. Quite possibly a hate crime. The words hate crime hung in the air, heavy and damning. Henderson began to tremble visibly. No, it wasn't. I'm not a racist, Chief, I swear. I have black friends, he blurted out, the desperate, cliched defense sounding utterly hollow, even to his own ears. Marcus ignored the pathetic protestation. He turned briefly to the teenagers. You three, I need your full names and contact information. An officer will be by later to take your official statements. And Jamal, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. Thank you again for that video. It will be invaluable. He then turned his attention back to the quivering Henderson. Mr. Henderson, you are currently being detained for investigation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights, as I have read them to you? He recited the Miranda warning with a chilling professional precision that left no room for ambiguity. Henderson could only nod, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a terror that was a stark contrast to the arrogant contempt he had displayed towards Maya just minutes earlier. The power dynamic had shifted with a brutal, irrevocable finality. Within minutes, two uniformed Oakhaven police officers, summoned by Marcus via his police radio with a calm, concise directive, arrived on the scene. They were young, professional, and visibly taken aback to see their police chief personally involved in what appeared to be a minor park disturbance, until they saw the tearful face of his daughter and the utterly damning video footage Jamal quickly replayed for them. Their expressions hardened with a shared, disgusted understanding. Mr. Alistair Henderson, the neighborhood curmudgeon, the man who had terrorized a 10-year-old girl, was formally arrested, handcuffed, with a notable lack of the excessive force he himself might have employed, and placed in the back of a patrol car. As he was driven away, a small, ignominious figure, he caught a final glimpse of Maya Johnson, now standing tall and a little straighter beside her formidable father, her small hand tucked securely in his. The enchanted forest on her torn drawing might have been momentarily destroyed, but the real-world dragons were, it seemed, being decisively slain. The incident in Harmony Glen Park and the subsequent arrest of Alistair Henderson did not remain a quiet, local affair for long. Maya's courage in calling her father, combined with the teenager's quick thinking in recording the event, and Captain Johnson's decisive, professional, yet deeply personal response, created a perfect storm of public interest. The video went viral within hours, first locally, then regionally, then nationally. The narrative was irresistible. A racist bully targets an innocent black child, only to discover her father is the city's police chief. It was a story of instant karma, of tables dramatically turned, of poetic justice served cold. News outlets descended on Oakhaven. Editorials were written. Pundits pontificated. Henderson, much to his chagrin, became the unwilling poster child for casual, everyday racism, his sour, contemptuous face plastered across newspapers and television screens. The Oakhaven Police Department, under Chief Johnson's firm and newly scrutinized leadership, launched a thorough internal review of its policies regarding harassment, bias, and community engagement, particularly concerning interactions with minors and vulnerable populations. For Maya, the experience was undoubtedly traumatic, but it also became, in an unexpected way, empowering. She saw firsthand that injustice, even when frightening, could be confronted.